Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Jean Bart B. This is our one time of the year to get our hands on this admittedly very special French premium battleship. Having a reload booster on a battleship is not particularly common, and a decent reload to start with means you get cruiser-like reloads while we have our booster up on a battleship, which is incredibly powerful. The ship has solid AP, great HE, it's reasonably quick, you even get an engine boost, reliable enough armor, at least when we're not facing 32 mil overmatch. This is a solid ship to get out of Black Friday. But is it worth the $75 US, nearly $100 Canadian? Well, that's a lot of money still. And being tier 9 is an unfortunate spot to be in these days. You have some of the worst matchmaker in the game. You're often up-tiered into super ship games, which bring a lot more of that 32 mil overmatch, or at the very least, much stronger HE spammers that can get through that 32 millimeters of armor. The guns being solid, but a little bit inconsistent can be a little bit frustrating as well. But it's a very unique playstyle, and if you're someone who is not going to get Bourgogne, you know steel is just too expensive. It's very difficult to get your hands on steel if you're not playing a ton of ranked, or more importantly, clan battles is the best way to get resources like steel. Bourgogne is one of my favorite battleships because it allows you to do this, alright? You get an insane salvo off, and then you reload boost. Notice how this Kremlin's going to turn his turrets. This is super common in battleship brawls. You get your salvo off, you turn your turrets in preparation to getting that broadside. But we reload so quickly, it doesn't even get to the point where he gets on our side. That is the power of the Jean Bart. That is the power of a reload booster. And while I like the consistency of Bourgogne with basically the same matchmaker these days, it's unfortunate for tier 9s. I think Jean Bart is an excellent pickup from Black Friday. Given that you can only get it during this period, and you get a 15% discount on tier 9s if you're at all interested in a battleship with a reload booster, excellent on a flank, and more importantly, if you get into those up tiers, just HE spamming out of this ship is actually very good. I got an example game to show you where I essentially just HE spam my way to over 200k damage in a super ship game. It can perform in those situations as well. Even though I prefer AP and flanking and catching broadsides, these citadels, black ribbons, although there's 2 black ribbons now. Did you notice that? Why are assists not just red like kills are? I don't understand why Wargaming did that. Regardless of that tangent, we get ourselves against an enemy Bourgogne, who is flat broadside. And this is a unique feature of a lot of these French battleships. You go broadside and you don't take citadels. Jean Bart has this as well. That Bourgogne just did 12,500 damage to us with HE. We're bow in more than we did into his broadside with AP. The HE certainly is no joke. Both of these ships I find to be incredibly fun to play. And while I prefer Bourgogne personally, at tier 9, having a Jean Bart is a very unique playstyle and is really, really fun. I want to show you, though, how not to start a game. This is our super ship example, or one of our super ship examples, where we're going to shoot a lot of that high explosive. We're bow in here. This is how a Jean Bart was played in the past and was very difficult to take down. Nowadays, though, that is a pre-kited Hanover with range mod, perhaps, that's going to be overmatching us, as well as a Kearsarge with planes, Libertad with secondaries that pen us everywhere. Oh, and by the way, there's also an Utrecht here with bombs that can full pen us everywhere. 32 millimeters of armor. It's a little scary in these up tiers, all right? You got to be careful. Kiting with this ship early on, playing a little safer around islands than I did here is going to be required. We're still going to get great damage here, but we're going to nearly die in this early game. And you got to be careful with something like Jean Bart. Maybe you know this already, maybe you're thinking to yourself, obviously, bow in open water like this with a battleship, especially 2 tiers down in this one, obviously you're going to struggle. But this is how Jean Bart used to be played. This is how it used to perform incredibly well. It's very difficult to deal with a bow on Jean Bart like this. Not so much these days. You got to play it a little bit more carefully. In fact, a little more like a battle cruiser. Something we've been talking about recently with the Rhode Island B releasing, as well as things like Puerto Rico. We'll look at Alaska here soon as well, don't you worry. These ships are not tanky, okay? They need to be played as secondary tanks. Hopefully our main, who is taking his time getting into the battle. These super ship games tend to have this as well, by the way. Hanover is the furthest back on their team. Maine is the furthest back on our team. Okay, I'm not going to rant too hard about that, but man, the up tiers are brutal in Tier 9 these days. It's very, very difficult. You gotta play it more like a battle cruiser. You want to find the flanks with AP. It's not always going to happen for you, so swapping over to HE is incredibly important here. As is saving our damage controls. That is a very last second fire from the very final secondary that Libertad shot at us. You can be burnt down here as well. Utrecht makes a mistake and goes broadside. That's not the best. In fact, look at Maine dispersion compared to ours. Maine has like 1.7 Sigma battleship dispersion. We have 1.9 Sigma, and ours looked horrible. Sometimes that happens. It is still a battleship at the end of the day, and that's where the reload booster comes into play. While it does not have the best consistency per salvo, you do have the ability to just pop a reload booster and get cruiser-like, or at least heavy cruiser-like reloads on your battleship. That's the saving grace of this ship, as well as Bourgogne. It's not always going to feel like it's the most consistent. And in fact, I played a lot of games today to get some good matches in Jean Bart. It was being a little temperamental, shall we say. It took me a while to find any sort of consistency out of it. But at least we had the reload boosters that gave us that opportunity. Sometimes it's not going to result in anything particularly special. Here, though, allowing us to get some incredible HE damage. Even into a Hanover here, we already have a Witherer. I'm not going to spend too much time on this battle because, let's be honest, farming HE from the back of the map out of a battleship, it's kind of boring. It's my least preferred playstyle in the entire game, if I'm honest with you. But I do need to show you that this ship does pretty decently with that role. And I was also a little surprised when I looked into the stats of this ship relative to other Tier 9 battleships that it doesn't have the highest DPM. I often associate Jean Bart with a DPM-focused battleship, where we're a little bit less focused on individual salvos and just more focused on keeping those guns hot. Something like Vermont is the opposite, right? Where you get one salvo every 40 seconds. You better make sure it counts. Jean Bart feels a little bit different than that, where we're trying to get more DPM on target. But in fact, we only have like a little under 100k HE DPM, 219k AP DPM. And that puts us towards the bottom, or at least middle of the road when it comes to Tier 9 battleships. We do have 380mm guns. There's plenty of battleships at this tier nowadays that have like 305s that understandably have better DPM. Carl Johan as a great example of that. But what makes it feel like it has higher DPM, or at least gains the consistency of these higher DPM ships, again, is that reload booster. It comes down to this reload booster. It's basically just a Richelieu, right? Like a little better reload, sure, but it's basically just a Richelieu, which is not my favorite Tier 8 battleship in the world. But a reload booster, it is such a powerful consumable. If someone goes broadside to you, you can instantly be loaded. If someone damage controls a fire, as we're going to see a little bit later in this battle, you can use your reload booster. Someone goes broadside, but you just shot at someone else, you can use your reload booster. It is so fun to have this consumable. And unlike something like Strasbourg, which I looked at somewhat recently, thanks to Ship Request, making me look at some of these very bad ships, as always on that series, that thing has a ridiculously long reload on its reload booster. Here we just have a 2-minute cooldown, which is not the fastest, but it's more than usable enough. Very nice salvo into the Carl Johan there. Sometimes it just connects incredibly well. Only 12k into the broadside GK, which is a little disappointing, but then we get like 20k into the Carl Johan at closer ranges. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. That is just battleship dispersion for you. Jean Bart B, our counterpart here, he's going to take a fire and damage control it. And, well, we got a reload booster available to us. I also want to note on the anti-aircraft capabilities of this ship, you're going to notice, especially in some of the older content on this ship, and maybe even into the list of features, is that it gets high AA defense efficiency. Wow. It's really not that good of AA, guys. I'm sorry, but it is pretty bad when this ship has to deal with even tier 8 carriers. On its own, it's not going to work very well. You got to clump up, of course, and even then, full strikes are still going to get through. Notice the very quick double insta-fire to punish the Jean Bart's consumable usage here, his damage control. It's so convenient, and that's what makes it feel like it has more DPM. I associate consistently punishing damage controls or early damage controls, single-fire damage controls. I find I'm often only able to do that, punish consistently, when I do have high DPM. And man, just that flexibility of a reload booster. No special heals here, no special damage controls here. The engine boost is only an 8% engine boost, unlike Bourgogne with the 15% engine boost there. So a little bit less maneuverability than the Bourgogne, I would say. Unfortunate salvo on that Alaska, but we have that reload booster. Although at these ranges, he'll probably get himself angled in time, at least by the time those shells land there. The shell velocity is decent, but more importantly, you have 24.5 kilometers of range, which is more than even some tier 10 battleships have. Again, allowing you to more comfortably use this ship at higher tier. You can't get as close at higher tier when you're in those up-tiered games, but at least you can keep the guns firing and use that high explosive at those longer ranges. We're going to take a gigantic chunk of damage here from the Nakhimov, unfortunately. Again, that AA is just not worth really talking about too much. It's quite unfortunate. As are the secondaries, okay? I've seen people use secondary Jean Bart, even secondary Alsace, things like this. Unfortunately, these ships only have 100mm secondaries. And when it comes to French 100mm guns, that means we only get 17mm of pen. And because of that, we can't even pen superstructures of battleships or cruisers at this tier, making them only useful for fires. It's really not worth building into them, in my opinion. Standard battleship dispersion as well. So I would just go with tank main gun build, a little bit focused on concealment as well. Concealment is rather solid here, I would say. Getting our last second reload booster into this Bourgogne. Very lucky we didn't die to that Bourgogne, by the way. The carrier forcing us to go very broadside. Our carrier forcing Bourgogne to angle and then die to those. All right, I hear you. Okay, I'm not going to get into it too much, but man, carrier games are something else. Missouri going broadside should be a punish. Unfortunately, we're out of our reload boosters, which I'm rather proud of, by the way, that I managed to use all of my reload boosters. But in this case, it'd be nice to have a follow-up shot ready after we do essentially zero. One of the big mistakes I make when playing ships with a reload booster is I get a little greedy. I want to wait for the damage control to get the insta double fire. I want to wait for that perfect broadside to get the reload booster. And as a result, I just don't use my reload booster that often, and I'm left sitting with a bunch of them later on in the battle. Very nice salvo into that Novosibirsk, another up tier into super ships, by the way. It can do some good work, but you just got to play a little bit more passive in those super ship games and pick your opportunities, all right? Atago gonna go broadside onto us. Don't have my reload booster here quite yet, unfortunately. Again, trying to use it early on. And we get 2 overpens, unfortunately. He's still going to be okay. I'm not going to overemphasize it too much, but just look at how much this Atago's broadside and not getting punished. Sometimes it's just a bit of a shotgun when it comes to Jean Bart. And that's 8 guns. I think that's why I enjoy one of the reasons I enjoy Bourgogne a little bit more is thanks to having 12 guns. You just feel a little bit more consistency out of that shell volume. Pushing up too aggressively here, let's be honest, but I wanted to see if I could make it work. I've talked about how poor the armor is here on Jean Bart, but we got to do some limit testing still here, see what we can make happen. Notice, not a carrier game, very crucial here. Bliss going to get spotted, just getting out of his smoke, and we got the HE loaded. Make sure you run Gunfeeder, by the way. We'll talk about the build in a little bit, but Gunfeeder is just so important on a ship like this one. Swapping to the HE, back to the AP, both are very usable, very viable. You want to switch ammo types quite often. Our turret gets temporarily knocked out. I should talk about that as well. The change that Wargaming has made to module destruction, and no longer can turrets be permanently destroyed. Huge buff to something like Jean Bart. Didn't happen very often, to be honest with you, but every once in a while, you'd get a turret permanently knocked out, or if you're really unlucky, you get both turrets permanently knocked out, and then you're basically just a torpedo at that point. It was pretty sad every once in a while to see that happen to Jean Bart's. Very glad that doesn't happen anymore. This was already giving us enough broadside to get that cheek salvo, and certainly here, giving like 45 degrees of broadside. Still not getting quite the salvos I was hoping for, to be honest with you, as well as playing this bow-on playstyle on an island. Makes you a perfect target for those torps. Sinop now goes broadside, and suddenly, look at that dispersion. I haven't seen dispersion like that all battle, all video. Wow, I think we would have full health almost any battleship there. Again, using our reload booster to catch an Atago, maybe broadside, although this time, I think he's going to get that angle in time. Having only 380mm guns means Atago 27mm upper belt, I believe. He can bounce our shells, and that is a bit of a downside here. Although, given our reload, our ability to flank as well as use HE, I would say it's oh, these salvos. I forgot that I put these towards the end. We showed the good stuff at the start, okay? We showed the good stuff at the start. It's a little bit less of a problem for this ship to have not as good overmatch because the HE, again, is quite good, and you should be finding flanking opportunities with this one. You're a little faster than the average battleship, and certainly you have a decent amount of speed thanks to this engine boost. Popping our reload booster here just to get this last salvo before the Kitakaze goes dark. We could blind fire it, sure, but getting that little bit of lock-on still, that lingering lock-on as he fades out of render range, is really nice to have. It also allows us to get, hey, another broadside shot on this Atago. Did those shells phase through him, or is that just me? And we do go down to the torpedoes. No hydro here means pushing is a little difficult, certainly. And I was trying to throw off his torps by trying to wiggle around, maybe. Maybe he predicted that I slow down and turn in. I don't know. Trying to do those mind games. Didn't work in that one, unfortunately. Mines broadside, and what do we get? A couple of overpens? Oh, an overpen and a full pen, unfortunately. But we have a lot of range, so now that we're pushed up on this flank, we're well in range. I mean, this carrier is over pushing here, but even where the carrier spawned, by the way, we would be in range to get him. And I think that's really undervalued, I guess. You don't always want to be using these ships for their max range, but the more you can push up on a flank, the more cross shots you can get. And on a lot of the maps, people tend to play bow in on islands, and carriers tend to play bow on just stationary. Oh, look at that dispersion. What happened there? Maybe that was lock-on bug, okay? But these cross shots you can get by pushing up some of these flanks are really, really handy, and this extra range that Jean Bart does have as an option is really nice. The reload here is pretty decent with the reload mod, which you should be taking. It's like 22-second reload then, which is really, really useful. Typically, you're going to get an opportunity to punish someone going broadside. If the shells cooperate, how is this mine still alive, bro? Another 4 overbeds. I couldn't believe it. It's a battleship at the end of the day. Sometimes that is going to happen with RNG. So, is Jean Bart B worth it? It's up to you guys. $75 US, nearly 100 Canadian dollars is certainly a lot to spend on a video game. Given that this ship is often available during Black Friday, maybe you don't want to do it this year. I would assume it's coming back next year for Black Fridays too, but this is your one opportunity per year to get your hands on this ship, alongside Alaska and Massachusetts. Azashio too, but that one's a little bit different, I would say. These three are the clear favorites, I would say, as far as Black Friday ships you can only get on Black Friday. Jean Bart offers a rather unique playstyle. Battleship with the ability to reload boost is very, very enjoyable. If the guns cooperate, can be a little bit shotgunny at times. The build that I was using looked a little something like this. We definitely want to get back to our heals as well as our reload booster when the carrier is flying around us. It's nice to have. I love this skill. For 2 points, this thing is incredible. It's 4 points on cruisers to get a similar effect. It's crazy. 2 points is a steal, in my opinion, for this one. Turret traverse is nice, even though the guns are all up front and you're typically going to be bow on. Sometimes it's really nice to have the faster turrets to swap over to a destroyer that briefly got spotted, using gun feeder to quick swap over to the high explosive. You know, it's like 13 seconds to swap. That's not too bad. Alongside using reload boosters, you can get some very quick, agile damage in with this ship. And yeah, definitely run Gunfeeder. You really have to with this thing. Adrenaline Rush, of course, and then otherwise relatively standard. Do not recommend running secondaries on this one. Please don't. I really don't think it's worth it on this thing. The rest of the build also is relatively standard. It's a standard battleships alongside the gimmick of a reload booster. Rather unique, not only to this ship, not exclusive to this ship, but we don't see it particularly often, I would say. I personally prefer playing Bourgogne, given that Tier 9 Matchmaker and Tier 10 Matchmaker is essentially the same these days. Very unfortunate for some of these Tier 9 ships. The armor here, bit of a weak point, I would say, these days too. 32 everywhere is not great, and you got to play a little bit more passive as a result. But still a very fun playstyle, especially if you're someone who doesn't have the steel and you don't think you're going to get the steel to go for something like Bourgogne, or maybe you want to get something else other than Bourgogne and you still would like that kind of playstyle. Jean Bart B looks to be a pretty solid option. But let me know what you think in the comments down below about Jean Bart. Maybe those interested in this ship can find alternative perspectives down there if you already own this ship. Thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.